we've done it ourselves, is that it really is a journey, and everybody says that, but probably the biggest lesson that I've got working in startups and working with startups is that you learn most through your failure, and you want to just move ahead. I think when people talk about that aspect, one thing to keep in mind is that you want to learn from that failure, right? So you want to analyze and understand what worked and what didn't. Because if you go to the next slide, Spencer, I think the key thing to keep in mind is that your startup is get to a repeatable and scalable business model. And this outcome is probably the most important one because it's going to be the only one that's going to be something that you and the investors will have in common. If you don't achieve this for them, you're going to be successful both as entrepreneurs and as a business. And we'll certainly talk more about what a repeatable and scalable business model looks like if there are questions towards the end. So you go to the next slide, and these are all aspirational, but just keep in mind that, sorry, Spencer, if you could go to the slide, please. Okay, there's someone who's got a lot of background noise, so if you could just mute yourself, so there's the whole idea through this process is that you are going to face things that are unforeseen because it's the first time you go through it, and it's important how you respond to it. I'll go through further sections. I'll talk about more specifics around there, but just know that the number one question we always ask our potential clients is, what does success look like for them? And if you don't have a clear idea of what your business success looks like, what your product success looks like, and what part of you are you willing to, you will sacrifice through that process. It sounds like something that you can just ignore, but that's probably one of the biggest reasons that people fail.
You mentioned that you addressed that early on. Have you always addressed that early on, or was it something that you've learned the hard way? You get to the end of a deal and not willing, or they haven't identified what success is and what they're willing to give up?
That's a great point. I think I consistently started asking this question when one of the clients that we were working with, when I asked him what success looks like, he said, at any cost, I have to make this company successful, and he was willing to take a second mortgage on his house to pay us. And a very long conversation, and I think that was probably the tipping point for me for realizing that if you don't have the end in mind, what will happen? One, you might make, as this entrepreneur was considering, sacrifices that you shouldn't. You're not going to be successful as an individual or a human. You're not going to be successful as an entrepreneur. But probably from the business side, the most important lesson I've learned there is that if you don't keep that outcome that you want in mind and you're not consistent with it, the desired outcome, one of the things that happens through the process is that with every new prospective customer that you meet, and I mean worse in not that investors are worse, but you will be making pivots. So if you don't keep that outcome in mind and then make the adjustments, which is the change that Darwin was talking about, right? It's evolutionary. You're successful. So hopefully, Spencer, that answers a little bit of what you were asking about.
I think your comment about success, willing to have success in your personal life or as a human, I think is what you said. Carry to success in the business.
Absolutely.
One is up to you. Is business investable? What do you say?
Okay. Well, let's move on to this next one. So I think many of us have seen a commercial for the Snuggie, own a Snuggie, bought someone that we probably didn't care for as much as Snuggie for Christmas or something like that.
I own two.
Owns two. So with products like these that are kind of a one-off gag type gift, a lot of these aren't as an investable type business. just discussing previously, like, is the business model scalable and repeatable? And that's something that many investors look at, and it also really does depend on what the mindset of the angel group you're working with, or, you know, depending on where you're at within the funding process, of what type of companies they're looking for. Specifically, where I've worked in the past, and the VCs and the other types of firms I've worked with, they're looking for more of a, you know, longer-term, non-fad type of product. So that's something that you can find out in your early stages of marketing research, your product development and things like that. But that's just the first thing to look at. So the next thing is do you need the money, and what else is this investment going to bring you? Many of us have watched Shark Tank before on TV, and many times these startups or companies are, you know, making money, can make a lot of the way, they have lots of sales online, but yet they aren't able to get to that next step. So they go to Shark Tank to be able to use the connections and to get into doors that they wouldn't be able to get into otherwise. And that's something that you need to look at as you are working with, you know, whatever angel group or, you know, investor that you're looking at. What else can they bring to the table other than money? In the past, and with different startups that I've worked with, they were having trouble figuring out manufacturing, and I was able to connect them with an investor within our group that works specifically in tech products being developed overseas. And he was able to work with them and help them with that problem. So not only was he able to invest later, but the mentorship that he was able to give before that was invaluable to them and worth more than the, you know, few $1,000s that they received in investment.
Question on what you just said there. You mentioned that you have to be able to convey why you need the money. What are some of the examples that you've seen while vetting some of these deals for these investors as good uses and bad uses of funds that investors would like to see? So what is one that you should just say, oh, you should never put this in your pitch deck because no investor wants to invest in that? And what are some that are acceptable or looked highly upon?
I think the biggest one that is a red flag is paying yourself. So you're looking, you come in and say, hey, we need $300,000, and $150,000 of that is to pay me for my last 2 years of working on this product that I went unpaid for.
Not interested in looking backwards.
Yes, definitely not. So there may be some type of pay structure to help you stay alive during that time, but that's exactly about as much money you'll get is enough to survive so you can continue and putting all of your efforts into that startup. So be very careful in the way that you ask for salary, and it would probably be something that you would do during due diligence after the initial pitch and you have investors that are interested. I wouldn't bring that up specifically at the very beginning, and that's something that can be negotiated later because many times these investors will also want to be on your board of directors. And that's something that you can negotiate with your board of directors of how you will be compensated and what part of the fund should be used to help compensate you and help you, I guess, live day to day. So that's just something to be very wary of, and I've had people say that they were going to pay themselves $100,000 for 3 years, prorated basically, so they were just going to get $300,000 just for doing what they're doing.
And just to clarify your role, you are you this person that sees?
Yeah, I'm like the gatekeeper.
Okay.
To decide whether or not you even get to the people that will even think about investing in you.
So you're given a mandate or a directive, you know, and you're based on your experience of those that get funded. That helps you shape, you know, who you send forward, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. And within, so like for instance, with Park City Angels, this is something that you can look up on their website, parkcityangels.com. What they look for specifically is they're looking for Utah-based companies that are in a variety of industries they like to invest in. Those are like software type products, med devices where they've invested in the past, and a variety of others. So whenever you're looking at an angel group, make sure you go on their website, look at their blog, look at their Twitter feed, just go through their website and find out what type of deals they've done in the past and see whether or not your business fits into what they're looking for. Many times I would go through people that would send us deals through Gust, which is a investment platform. I'm not sure if you guys have talked about that in the past, but there's Angels List. Gust is one that we use, and you can create a profile on there and then send your information to a variety of groups to have them your idea. And with Park City Angels, their directive was we want to invest in Utah companies and help grow the Utah economy. So if you were from Utah, then you got, on one track to even, we give you more consideration than in other companies. And of the time that I was in there, I think we only met with probably 3 to 5 companies that were outside of Utah. And the only reason we met with those was because one of the investors had a personal connection with one of those companies.
Very cool.
So that's just something to think about, that, with the investors, do you fit in the mold of what they're looking for? If they only invest in SaaS products and you're selling a Snuggie, you're not the best fit for them. Just something to think about as you're going through that, and then just what connections can they help you out with in the future? What is their background? I know many times many of these investors have a financial background, and they can come and become your CFO and help you out until you're able to get enough cash to where we can actually hire another CFO that can come on full-time or things like that. So what's their background? How can they help you?
How open should people be with the gaps that they do need to fill? I mean, you say if there's a gap of a CFO, that this angel might fill that role. How forthcoming are you as you're pitching with your gaps?
I think you be fairly open about it, because they know, if you're jack of all trades, maybe they may look down upon that, but if you're like, hey, I'm the master of my product, I know how this works, I know this industry, I just don't know this part, and that's what I need help with, they'll be totally fine having you in that section of wherever you're weak, whether it be operations, marketing, finance, whatever it may be. If you have a great product, but you just don't know how to market it, and they can see that potential, then they'll totally help you with that.
You're saying don't hide it.
I would say and that's where my experience, and it may be different depending on what group you're talking to, but also, depending if you're a single person pitching or if you have a team, at least show that you have some breadth of skill sets within your team. If you have a med device, but you actually no experience in the medical field, you probably shouldn't be doing that. You should be bringing in other people, saying, I'm the operations guy or I'm the engineer, and we bring in this other guy that's really into medical, or a doctor or a PhD or whatever. He brings in that experience for us.
I'll keep this in here.
And so the next thing that goes along with that is sometimes we would look at ideas as come in, and the total addressable market was very, very small. One in particular was a med device that we were looking at, and it was so niche that it was very difficult to invest in, because the ability to get a return out of the product and the time it would take to get that return, many investors didn't see that as a great opportunity. So it's just something to look at, and it's something that's pretty basic that you do know in your very first competitive research and your analysis as you're deciding whether or not you should move forward with an idea. It's just something to make sure that if you do have a large market size and you have a great pathway to address that market, then make sure you say that and express how great of opportunity that is, or it may not be that beneficial, or they may not see it as a great opportunity and be jumping at investing with you.
And you've talked about fit. I mean, understanding who you're pitching to, and don't try and bark up the wrong tree. Don't try and break their mold. If they invest in one category and you're not in that, if you're not in their group, then bother.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and say you have a connection within that group, ask them, where else should I pitch? And many, like for instance, within Park City Angels, a lot of those investors were also invested elsewhere. So they can help you out, you know, maybe, hey, we're not a right fit for you, but talk to, you know, the Salt Lake Angels or whatever it may be, and they can help you out that way.
That follow-up question is essentially, you know, thank you for your time. Is there anyone else you think I should talk to?
Yeah, definitely.
So, turn it back to you, and what readiness level is someone in a position to go out and seek investment?
Right. So, even before you figure out the technical readiness of your product, right, and every product will have its own level of judge there, you want to make sure that it is usable in the promise you're making. So let me walk through a couple of things and, you know, tell you anecdotally some of the mistakes that not only have I seen been made, but have made myself. Can we go to the next slide? Does anybody know what this is? Let me tell you the context of the story. I was pitching for a client, and we were at a VC up on Sand Hill in the Bay Area, and it had taken a lot for us to get that meeting. And I was about 30 minutes into an hour-long meeting, just passionately going through the deck, and he goes, I know you're really passionate about this. I can just see the passion come through. What? And so if you go to the next slide, the number one thing that I learned there is that if you don't have clarity, and I do this, I'll tell my mom, she lives in India, she's 70 years old, and at times when I'm struggling with a product, I'll try to call her and try to explain it to her. And she's smart, but she's not, you know, technical, and if it's a technology product, if I can't explain the value, if I can't be clear, then it doesn't work. And sometimes when you can't be clear, use analogy. I'm Uber for freight trucks. That helps. But if you can't easily and simply describe your product, then you've got one challenge in your value proposition. Now, for the next slide, beyond clarity, what you're thinking about is your product differentiated? Differentiation in itself is really important, but if you go to the next slide, that doesn't work, right? A pink iPhone didn't work, but that differentiation has to resonate with the customer. You know, if you go through the TVC, if you go through other incubators that do this well, they will have you talk to tons and tons of prospective customers. And I've been an entrepreneur, you guys are all entrepreneurs. One thing that drives us is a blind passion and faith in what we're doing. And unfortunately, as much of a positive force that can be, it also becomes a negative force if you're not talking to people who are potential buyers. And the things we always tell our clients, your aunt and uncles and your friends are not active clients. Prospective customers are people who pay, and it has to resonate with them. And then, so it has to be differentiated. If you go to the next one, please. It has to resonate. And then measurable. Because every time you put a product out there, you have to be able to say, it's the X% cheaper, it's going to make your productivity X% better. There has to be some measure. And this measure doesn't have to be absolute or accurate. It just has to be in that ballpark so that when you're making that claim, and at this point you're just making a top-level claim, they haven't used your product, that has to go into your that has to go into your positioning, that has to go into your message. So your product, it has to be very clear, and its value has to be differentiated, measurable. Go to the next slide. Your clarity. Does anybody know what this is? Last one. Does anybody know what this is? If you go to the next slide, this one was a molecular structure of vitamins. The next, please. was the molecular structure of aspirin. This was another one of the lessons that I've learned the hard way, right? You address a pain. Aspirin addresses a pain. Vital good for long-term health. I can tell you of at least a dozen startups from the 90s that took over 100 million in capital and went nowhere, because at that point, that was just a vitamin. You address a pain, and you have to ask yourself, is this pain real for your customers? And the two ways you do it is, one, certainly you talk to them and you find out if there's something they'll pay for. And by the way, every time I've done it after, say, my first 5-6 years of my career, I just ask, would you pay for it? Would you pay for it? And I almost don't care how much they pay for it, because everybody's going to lowball, but if they're willing to pay, that means there is some real pain that you've unearned. The way to look at it is that markets created, they exist. If you have to go create a market, and of course, 4 of you in the audience was thinking about Apple now and say they create markets. Apple for the iPhone, just outbound marketing, is $500 million. Those can create markets. For the rest of us mortals, right, you have to say, here's an existing market, here's a gap in it. Is the gap large enough that it is the gap that is a pain, not a vitamin, which means people figure out how to address it rather than they don't care to address it. When you've done all this prep work going in, then you know that you got the kind of product that is the market. And know that, again, I didn't address it from a product readiness perspective, as in, does the product work? You will know whether it works. But minimum viable product, the thing that you hear about, have these characteristics and then enough of a market.
Hey, Vishal, question on something you just mentioned a bit ago on the differentiation and understanding how the market will digest that differentiation. How have you found, or how do you show differentiation when you are explaining or pitching to an investor? What is the best way to show how you're differentiated?
Good question. So what we typically do is, the way to show differentiation is to show how's it different from others. So one of the things we always do is we start off with a market landscape. We say, hey, here's the market of, say, wireless products. And there's Bluetooth, and there's low energy Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and there's LTE. And we get into this part that is unoccupied, that is, and this thing doesn't exist, but there's low energy LTE. So give them a context of what the need is with other participants in the broader market, because that establishes a need, because it shows that there's a market, and then show what piece of that we're addressing. Now, with any landscape, you're going to have some parameters, so you should say that around what are the key values or key characteristics of which people buy. And if Ted, you're familiar with this framework that I've used before, so if people would like to just get an example, feel free to send them that single example if they want. That'll give them a context for the differentiation.
Great.
Sure. Who is? Scott. Okay. So, sorry, I thought this was Scott's section. It's still mine. So, one of the best market jobs ever done in the world was done, because the very first word that comes into mind when you say the word startup for me is VC. Now, with association, I want to give you this context because I want you to realize that while there is an elevated status, that anybody who gives you money in life, to realize that it has to also be one where you establish mutual need and respect. So if you go to the next slide, as I was talking about, the V's, they seem to be the end-all answer. And Scott, please allow me this piece, and then disagree with me if you like. But if you go to the next slide, the moment you're going to a VC, the first thing that I tell our clients is there are 2 times you should go to a VC. For survival, if you like, please, or for scale. If you just need to, the more you hone your idea, the more you do it without capital, there are 2 things that happen. You keep a greater percentage of your business, which is not important just from a money perspective, but from a control. The second is that you really figure things out. Because the moment you take money from someone, you often tell our clients, right? Ask your mom for $10. What's the next question she asks you? What are you going to do with it? If you go to the next slide, the moment you take from a VC, right, you have become in some sense a sales organization for them, because at that point, when you take that money, if you're taking it to survive, which means you're going to improve, you're going to have one type of profile that you'll need. If you're taking it for scale, then that's the perfect time, because you've established and proven that this product has a real place in the market, and now you're using it for scale. I don't know if that exactly resonated, if Spencer, you or Taylor have any questions around that, but certainly I'm of the belief that you, sorry, go ahead.
I like that twice now you've mentioned your mom in the webinar. One is to, can she understand it? And if she understands it, will she give you $10?
Exactly. The end ends with, it's the $15 that she gave me, which led to, no, I'm just kidding.
Just a small $1 million loan.
Yeah, exactly. Annually, of course.
Well, actually, Vishal, Scott showed us, he unbuttoned the top buttons of his shirt, and underneath he has a T-shirt that says what you had on your slide there. So,
yeah,
true. It's true.
Yeah,
Scott also has a cape, but that's a whole different story, right, Scott?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But I completely agree with you, though, that if you go to a VC or get any type of funding, if you're okay with losing control, whether it be a small amount of control or a lot of control, depending on where you're at in your startup, you need to be okay with that. And that's why also having the right fit with your investor is really important, because if you're both on the same wavelength on where you want the company to go, then that will be a cohesive relationship. If the investor wants to go one way, but you feel like it should go another, then there's going to be problems, because they're the money and you're just the guy with the idea. So, so just be really careful with that. So I totally agree with what you were saying before.
So Scott, when is the right time? When should a startup be looking for? So
you should probably start yesterday. So for me, as an example, like I mentioned, I'm currently in graduate school. Part of the reason I went there was to create my network. I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and I was trying to think of the best way to have me be successful going on in the future. And that's why I've been working with Park City Angels and getting into the entrepreneurial scene here within Silicon Slopes, is because when I do need money for my idea that is going to, really make a difference in the world and provide a lot of value, I wanted to have investors and all the right people in my back pocket that I could reach out to help me get my idea off the ground and not be starting from ground zero. So,
Scott, a question on that. As you were seeing these deals come through Park City Angels, how are you able to sense if we're starting too late or starting at the right time in terms of going to the Angels? How did you know whether their timing was correct?
So after speaking to them, it became very apparent most of the time whether or not they were too early or too late. Sometimes people would come in their pitch deck or what they put into Gust, and that's what we reviewed before we actually spoke to them. They made it seem like their idea was farther along than what it really was, and in reality, the drawings and the pictures that they had were all they really had. They didn't have any customers. They didn't have really any validation done, and I would say that is too early. if you can get at least a prototype or some sales, as well as a lot of customer validation and purchase orders or anything like that, that will help you get along in that process. So do as much work as possible beforehand, because what many of these investors hate is when people come and they have this idea, they ask for money, and basically ask the investors to do all the other work for them.
So when you're pitching to an investor and you don't have those things, you don't have revenue, you don't have customers, you need money to develop the next iteration of your product so that you can go launch. What are the investors telling those companies where they should get their money? Because it seems like that is an angel's job. So where do you get that money to get your customers if it's not with these investors?
So even if you can get some type of beta test maybe to where you can say, hey, we have 10 people that could potentially be customers, like they're not paying currently, but I'm a developer and I've already built out the majority of the features or just a few features that I feel like they're most critical to what this product will be, and they're using it now and they really like it and they're asking for more, but to give them more, I need this money to get to that next step. I think that is one way that you're actually making revenue, but yet you still need the money to get to the next step.
But it's more than drawings. I mean, you have a working prototype and you have users.
Yeah, it's like if you can get as far as you can on your own, and you have, I mean, because if you don't have any validation at all, then I don't think you should be pitching to investment group. So if that validation is through customers, through revenue, through beta testers, through personal interviews, you know, whatever your validation is, just make sure that it's solid and it's enough of a sample size to show that there is a need. Like discussing just barely, like your aunt, uncles, and cousins aren't customers. People that will pay for your product are customers. So that's really something to look at. So I mean, and I guess the way to maybe start getting some more validation outside of family members and your close friends that will always tell you yes and how great you are, is to go to different like networking events and co-working spaces. Specifically here in the Salt Lake Valley, you have like Church and State, Impact Hub, Pando Labs is up in Park City, and that's like the home base for Park City Angels. So if you want to get into Park City Angels, go to Pando Labs and get involved in the community there. They have meetups, they have events. If you go there, you will meet investors and you will meet people that will help you to the next step. And I'm sure it's the same with some of these other co-working spaces that I haven't had as much experience with, but there are people there that are happy to help you, and their whole job is to startups and help people get their ideas off the ground and provide you feedback.
I think one thing Vishal said was, you know, he was 30 minutes into a presentation and then he gets stopped and someone asks, you know, what is this again? And what I'm hearing you say is you don't want to show up to you won't even probably get the audience, but you don't want to show up at a pitch and someone saying, who are you? Right? You want them to at least recognize you because you've been hanging around.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's probably what I think that's the next slide. And say a little bit more, but like once you go to these places, connect with these people on LinkedIn and find a champion for your idea. Well, I found the most successful ideas that came through Park City Angels were those that had either a personal connection or made a personal connection through their networking to one of our investors. And many times they would come in and we would only give them 15 minutes to pitch and have a question and answer session, which, you know, if you're asking for a couple $100,000, it's not very much time. But many times they would go through that and they would leave and we would have a discussion amongst the group. And if they had a champion there, the champion would stand up and talk about the product and give more feedback and more background on the idea.
How do you get a champion? How do you, if I was to go up to the Angels and I met one, what was my question to that investor to engage with me? It sounds like not on an investment level initially to get them to be a champion. How do you do that?
So you need to find the right one first. So say you go find someone, the example I like to give is like if you have a med device, with many of these groups, there are ex-doctors or people that have been in the med device industry and have made a lot of money, and now they're coming back to invest and help companies. If you find one of those investors and get them to believe in your product and basically sell them on it, that is the best way to do it, because they're like, do you know what? I worked on a product exactly like this, and there's a huge market for it, and if we can get you through this process, I've already been through it, I can help you with it, let's get you invested and whatever, and that's really what I've seen the most of is...
Go ask them for something, not money?
Hey, I have this med device, I have a question about how to get, FDA approval on it, and many of these investors are more than happy to go and answer these questions for you. And then once they learn more about your product, if they think you're ready for investment, they'll refer you to whoever it is that they need to that makes those type of decisions. And then once again, and that's how they become the champion for you. And say you have a med device, but the person you talk to has been in software, they'll pass you on to the right person. But once again, that's all just the working side of it.
And if I just add real quick to what Scott said, right? I was talking about the product, and I said that you have to have resonance, right? Resonance has to be genuine. So one of the things that we've seen, particularly with VCs, right? When someone says engage with someone, please make sure that you're not trolling them, right? There is a difference between a genuine relationship, because they can't help. One of the things that money people are very good at is they'll give you a direct signal that they can't or unwilling. And I'm sure, Scott, you resonate with this. I just have seen people spend so much time with people who have multiple to them that they're not interested. Keep that in mind as well, because your time is, huge for you.
Yes, definitely. And I think that is one of the things that goes back to my last point of, is the business investable, and where you should be starting is, are you coachable, and do you kind of get those type of cues? So if they do say no, I don't have time or whatever, find a different avenue, or ask them, is there someone else I should talk to? Because many times they're investing in you because good idea, but a lot of money is going to you and your team. And many times we would be, for instance, there was a group that we asked them to put their information in Gus, and they hadn't filled it out all the way. And we said, hey, we're interested, but please fill out the rest of your profile. And they emailed back saying, our profile's on Angel's List, so go there. And I'm like, so, we do it off of here, and they wouldn't fill out the rest of their profile because they'd already done it somewhere else. And that was a huge red flag to us, because they're like, if they're not even willing to fill out the rest of their profile, how are they going to be when we give them feedback or give them our opinion on where they should go? Like, why are we going to give them money when they won't even listen to us? So whenever you're talking with people, make sure that you take that feedback, not feedback, it's your idea, you have the experience behind it, so you don't have to implement all of it, but make sure that you take it into consideration, because most of these investors are really successful. They've been around the block once before, so just make sure that you take their advice into account. And if you try to get invested from a group and then you don't get funded, or you don't even get to this round, ask them, hey, what can we improve upon? What can we do better? And they'll give you feedback, because they're looking for good companies. And if they think that you have a promise, they'll give you that feedback, make those changes, pivot what changes are necessary, and you have a really good chance of, in the future, whether it be, we've had people that we said no to, and then a year later they come back and pitch and get funding. So it may take some time, but it's definitely possible.
That's a good question. Is your no, is it no, not right now, or no, right? And if it's
most of the time, it's not right now.
Great.
It's get more customers, build it out a little bit more, work on this, and most of the time they'll be very specific on what they didn't like, and then hey, come back again another time, and we'll be happy to help.
Well, we want to leave a few minutes at the end for question and answer, and so we'll let Vishal have the last word here on this set.
A little bit, we touched on this. If you go to the next slide, when Spencer, you were asking Scott the question about it. The way we tell our clients to think about it is that there are three types of roles in companies. Someone who owns the strategy and the overall vision, and they have to keep sight of that. They're kind of the ones who establish the true north for your company and stay consistent on it. Click again, and this is the one that Spencer and Scott were talking about, is you have a domain expert, and you want to make sure that you have clarity on who is, if you think about the three legs of development, deployment, and marketing, right? You want to make sure that there's someone who has a clear idea of how and what we're going to develop, while the other person is keeping in mind the overall strategy direction. And then if you click the final piece of it, and then you want to make sure that you have people who are doing execution. Now, you have to have all of these people on board, but as you know, we were alluding to earlier, you want to make absolutely sure, whether you're talking about your team or the product risk or whatever you have, when you go into a VC, don't trying to figure out a way just to get money for them. They can be great partners for you in the long term, and don't be foolish about it, but yet be as honest and transparent about your business really stands. And I say that for us, we tell our clients, try to figure those things out before you go into the meeting, so you're presenting most optimistic but realistic perspective. Because the one thing, you know, if we've seen 100 companies and we've started to sniff out patterns, the investors see thousands of companies. They have seen every which way that someone tries to unauthentically or without credibility try to raise money. So team is another important part of it, and it's a really good punctuation, because as much as we talk about all these frameworks and technology and all of that that helps us today to be able to become entrepreneurs, it going, or maybe it calls for saying that the decision is always finally hinged on the people, and people do business with people that they resonate with. So,
good to kind of out that portion of the webinar. So Taylor, let's talk about next steps.
Yeah, so some of the things, I appreciate everybody's time on the webinar. I know that we have touched this topic at a very high level, and hopefully you've been able to pull information from it that will be helpful for you. There are a couple of action items that we're going to take care of after this webinar. One is, Vishal has agreed that he will make a trip out here to Utah and meet with groups that are interested in learning more about the fundraising experience and how he helps companies do that. So if you are interested, we'll be sending an email out to everybody who's joined. Jared Piper will send that out. And if you want to schedule a time with Vishal when he makes his trip out here, please let us know. And just reply to the email that Jared sends out, and we can set up a time. Vishal has agreed to basically spend part of his trip out here with those that would be interested in learning more about his company, Three-Legged Stool, and then just fundraising and how you can be more successful in that. Additionally, here at TVC, we'd love to give you the opportunity as well, anyone on the webinar today, to engage with our office in some of the technologies that are being developed here at the University of Utah. So some examples are now up on your screen of technologies that we're currently working on, and they're in various stages. We're looking for talented people to answer some questions if they are experts or knowledgeable about fields. And again, these are just some examples. So in the email that we send out, we'll be also suggesting or requesting that you fill out one of our engagement forms online at TVC so that we can continue to engage with you past the end of this webinar. And if you do that, we will start asking you some questions and letting you know about some of the cutting-edge technology that's being developed here at the U as opportunities for startups that you could potentially lead or be a part of.
Great. So let's open it up now for Q&A. If you want to just put your questions in the chat bar, that would help us out. One question that came in is if the slides will be available. Absolutely. We will clean these up and post them on the EVC website and include that in the email, link to that. So if you've had a question either for Vishal or for Jared, whether it's related to product development, Scott or Vishal, and let us know now. Taylor,
I was also going to offer that feel free to share my email address with them if they just think about something offline and want to send out a question. I'll be happy to get back to them.
Awesome.
Great. One question that we've had come in, how do you know if you have found resonance with the investors, and how do you judge resonance?
So I alluded to this a little bit, right? The thing that happens with investors is that they've figured out that they're in the deal flow business. There are a few brand names, but the rest of them are in the deal flow business. And so the first indicator is when they say no, they no, not right now. So you can always reach out. But if you have resonance, the very first thing is go investigate who they are, right? In today's day and age, everybody has 2-3 aspects of their personality as a social footprint available on the web. Whether it's a client meeting, an investor meeting, or even someone that I'm just casually meeting that people have introduced us, I always try to find out something of them in that I can that I truly resonate with. So resonance has to be genuine. I mean, there's not a formula to it, right? Think about when you went on your first date, right? The ones that were successful is when you were genuinely interested in something with the other person, and that led to the next date. So they're magic, Taylor. Just be genuine and do your research.
That's there. A couple of other questions that came in, and I'm going to shift the order a little bit. The first question I'd like to ask is, from how do you know when to give up on being an entrepreneur? Ouch.
Let me take that one, if it's okay, Scott, and then you can follow on. I'll go the investment thing, and that's about life as well, right? You are not a solid, functioning individual, which means you don't have food to eat, you don't have a place to stay. That would be the only time to consider giving up being an entrepreneur. Now, let me answer that question in a different context. However, there might be multiple times in your life that you give up on that business and do a different business. And I'll give you an example, and I tell Taylor and Spencer this. Once every 6 months, my partner and I have what we believe is a great startup idea. And one of us gets passionate about it, works on it, and then, in an informal way, but a genuine way, we present it to each other. And not a single idea in the last 12 years have passed our own muster, right? So remember that what you're trying to do as a business is find enough people who have enough pain that they were product. When that's not happening, remember the only thing that can change is the product, not market. In fact, one of the things that I have a problem with Andreessen coming up with product market fit is I really wish that he would have said it was market product fit, so that he would start thinking about the market first. Your fits into a market, and that's the time where you feel there's not a fit. That time to fold that business or make a pivot. I don't think that if you are entrepreneurial in nature, with the exception of needing to, and Maslow's triangle, just the basic needs, if you go get a job, otherwise you're an entrepreneur for life. So whether you think of it as a disease or a blessing, you're stuck.
I like that. Anything to add?
No, and I think on one side of this as well is that if you're not passionate about building your product anymore or your business, and it's more of a chore to go to work every single day, and that's probably a time that, once again, maybe you should look at doing something else that excites you more. If that is going to work for a larger corporation and doing a single type job every single day, and that would drive you, then maybe it might be that time to do that, and maybe you might get the itch to start your own business later and kind of have it be like a retirement from entrepreneurship. But, you know, it's in your blood. After a little bit of working somewhere else, you probably will get the itch again. But I don't think ever really, if you really love it and you have loved it in the past, it's probably more of a finding something else that excites you and doing that instead.
Yeah. The question that came in is, what is the best protocol for investors and entrepreneurs when a deal goes belly up and money has been lost?
You want to take that? You want me to?
You can take that one.
Well,
I don't have much experience with that.
I think that in a relationship, transparency is important. When the situation changes, be honest about it. I have worked for a startup, working $125 million, generating $1 million in revenue, and I, as a management team, had the distinction of sitting outside the last office to collect the paycheck, to give it to someone, to collect the invoice, to give it to someone that they could meet their rent. Sometimes if you've done the right thing, don't try to hide it, don't blame other people, be honest about what happened. Now, if you are to blame, take credit, because again, it comes down to people, right? Don't be afraid of failure. Be honest and learn from it. And hopefully that answers it. If there's a clarification on that, I can give it. But one of the biggest challenges, whether it's in education or in entrepreneurship, right, is this very, very controlled way we think there's a formula. No, the reality is that you can learn best practices. You will succeed as much as you'll fail. But when you fail, just be honest about it.
I agree with that. And also, too, I mean, lots of times if your company is failing and the investment is about to go belly up, there are signs that that's going to happen. So once again, be transparent with the investor and say, this is what it's looking like. Our competitor developed the exact same functionality that we have, and now we're not able to compete. So if you can just be upfront with that and then figure out, can you liquidate and sell off maybe some of the assets that you do have to help mitigate some of the loss that may be there, I think the investors would really appreciate that. Or if you really think that there is a way that you can save it, then once again, be upfront with them and have a plan ready of how you will make it better moving in the future. And if they thought you were good at the beginning, and if you continue that rapport with them, they'll continue to believe in you.
Great. We'll finish with one last question here from Karthi, and I think this goes to the questions or the points that Vishal has made about making a market. The question is how to pitch an idea that does not have much evidence of success in current era, but game changer for the future. And the example that Karthi gives is like how Nest thermostat used Wi-Fi and self-learning compared to a Honeywell thermostat.
So that's there are people, look at investors, they are people who invest in long-term ideas and have patience where they'll let you build that idea over time and let the market develop. But even the example of Next, Karthi, what technology is allowing us to do is to look at this big disruptions like internet, mobile, cloud, and disrupt existing industries. There's a swath of investors that actually invest in those kind of startups. I'm happy to answer it in more detail offline if you like, but again, look at the investor profile. There's no harm in asking for an investment of a business that'll return in years or longer.
And Vishal, a follow-up to that, about team. I mean, if it is truly something that is futuristic, how important is the team that in the investment?
Well, the team's always going to be investment, but if you think about the three things that people invest on, right, technology/idea, market, and people, they're balancing between market and people, right? And I will say that the team becomes more important when the market is proven, right? Because it's about the execution. So the team continues to be important, but probably in this context, in a longer term return on investment, they probably will look at the market and the market dynamics. At that point, they're making a bet.
Thank you.
Sure.
To thank Scott Hoops and Vishal Kapoor for being with us today. Thanks everyone for joining in. Look for a couple of follow-up emails, and hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Vishal.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.